All right. Here we are. Happy St. Patrick's Day. This is, you know, we never figured out. This is the anniversary of the first time we hung out.
Right.
I'm here with Anthony Smith, postmodernnegro.com, who emerged from blog hiatus today to talk about the Barack Obama, Jeremiah Wright controversy of last week and spilling over into this week, which I want to talk about some more.
Okay.
Because I think white America was exposed to black liberation theology in heavy doses last week, and I don't know that there's a great deal of understanding that has come out of it.
And many black Christians too, so
who haven't been exposed to that kind of preaching.
Not explicit liberation theology.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of black theology, or that's in local areas or on the ground, or organic that emerges from the black community, has things with liberation in it and social consciousness, or a theology that's concerned about social justice because of the historical existence of black folk, the history, the legacies that we have in this country. We create a theology of liberation of sorts. But any like Jeremiah Wright is a proponent of an explicit black liberation, or I would say Afrocentric theology.
Yeah, you talked about that. Maybe can you unpack Afrocentric maybe a little bit?
Well, basically, it comes from a movement within African American cultural history where blacks are trying to reclaim the heritage of their Africanness. It's meant to do two things. One, to reaffirm black humanity, that African Americans or that people of African descent are agents in history, that we are people, that we are human, that we're, and from a Christian perspective, that we are the imago Dei, that we're the image of God. The second part of that is it was a form of theology that resists and protests the supremacy or white supremacy that was inherent in North American Christianity. So on one hand, it affirms the cultural legacy and heritage of Africans, African American people of African descent, so that they do have a culture, that they do have a history, and they do have thoughts about God, as opposed to the hegemony or the controlling or the dominant story of Western Christianity that says, for a long time, for many centuries, that to be African is to be, or to be black is to be less than human, to be lower than Europe, and so what it tries to do is put Europe in its place. It also calls out European theology, which has a tendency to universalize its understanding of God and Christianity, but not realizing its own location, its own particularity. So African or Afrocentric theology calls it out and says, hey, this doesn't come out the sky. This was Europeans doing theology. Not saying there's no truth there, but there's a tendency within that oftentimes, as witnessed by some of the activity in the blogosphere, that that somehow Jeremiah Wright and many people that represent this sort of Afrocentric Christianity is some kind of aberrant form of Christianity. Which is ironic, because if you go to Jeremiah Wright's church's webpage, most of his theology, his beliefs, his doctrinal statements pretty much line up with what we would consider evangelical Christianity. The only difference is that there's an Afrocentric component to it. So it's difficult because we think that oftentimes that our Christianity comes straight out of heaven, and oftentimes that colors our understanding that our theology comes from a particular place, and particularly in North America, at least from the world I live in. We see daily how race and racism and white supremacy are a part of the DNA of the way we talk about God and society and human beings and so forth. So Afrocentric Christianity, a good book, a good introduction will be by J.D. Otis Roberts, Africentric Christianity. I actually posted on my website today.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that makes any sense. Does that make any sense, man?
Yeah.
Basically, it's black folks saying,
yeah,
y'all been doing theology for forever.
Right.
Right. And y'all said that we were like a little lower than a beast of the field. Not y'all, not you, but what I'm saying is that Western Christianity in general, it's an attempt to deconstruct that.
The dominant white culture. And I wanted to try and pull up Ed Gilbreath's blog. He's posted a couple things. He posted another thing here. But
go to the top, man. What is that?
Yeah, he's talking about quoting Princeton professor Melissa Harris Lacewell on the controversy. Something that she wrote over at theroot.com.
Right. Yeah.
But that has more to do with patriotism and.
That's another issue. I haven't had a chance to.
Yeah, that's the controversial "Goddamn America" message that was posted. We won't get into that necessarily.
I mean, we can. I mean, for me, that's one of the things I was talking to my good friend Rod Garvin about, who blogs over the Soul of Rod Garvin. And that's one of the things that
RodGarvin.com.
RodGarvin.com. There's a generational difference there, because Jeremiah Wright does represent the civil rights generation.
Okay.
For me, and this is the thing, I mean, Jeremiah Wright saying a lot of things that many black folks would agree with. I mean, seriously. Largely because the way that we understand American history collectively as a people.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? We for our sojourn, we never saw America as a city on the hill. You know, beacon of light, who worked in the nations, because we saw the underside, we saw the hypocrisy of American history. But on the flip side of that, Jeremiah Wright represents a prophetic, or an organic prophetic black church tradition, right? That wants to speak truth to power, right? And so, a lot of people who don't understand that tradition within the black church, who really have not really spent time with the text and time to listen to where that's coming from, and even how there's even a debate within the black church, even with these kind of traditions.
Right.
Everybody in the black church doesn't necessarily agree with Jeremiah Wright.
Sure. And I mean, I think that's part of the trouble. Is obviously there's a lot more complexity and nuance to these kinds of issues. Right. One of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, and we've talked about this before, is this idea of, and you touched on it a little bit in your post. Let me just pull this up real quick, and I'll quote you. Note, it is a strange irony that a theology that seeks to affirm black folks being made in the image of God, and that seeks to resist the long history of white supremacy in North American Christianity, would be considered racist.
Right.
It's the strangest of historical ironies. And I think that's people have said, well, listen to what he's saying. He sounds racist. And as you and I have talked before, that this idea of applying the term racist to African Americans is actually impossible, incorrect.
Well, it's complex. Obviously,
it's complex.
Right. It depends on what we mean by racism. It depends on what we mean by racist. Sure. Oftentimes in conversations like this, people assume what they mean by those terms.
Yeah.
Racist for many people in America means somebody who hates people of another color.
Right.
That's one version of it. In that sense, yes, African American could be a racist in the sense that I do not like white people because they look white.
Sure. Sure.
Or a racist could be, in a larger sense, somebody who unconsciously. Somebody who unconsciously help perpetuate systems or structures of injustice or structural injustice, whether consciously or unconsciously, right?
Right.
And that can be done through various things. Somebody who's in charge of institutions, a parent in the home, the way they raise their children. So races could be.
But isn't there a power and privilege component?
Right.
You sound like you've tempered your.
Well, I was probably angry that day when I said it.
Yeah.
Which is like some days.
Yeah.
But like today I was angry when I wrote that blog post. But I had prayed a little before that. But
so take that with a grain of salt, y'all, when you read that.
No, I mean, I calmed down a little bit by the time I had read that. But I read some of the blog posts by other people on the blogosphere, and I'm like, anyway. But anyway, yes, I mean, people would traditionally define racism as power plus prejudice. Right. Cultural power, institutional power, the power to, or structural power, institutional, cultural, societal power. And and so the question is that do black folk have enough power to shift and change institutions in the general direction of society? And some would say that no, they don't. And so the question is, who does? And so you tie that with the legacy of white supremacy and certain ideas about what race is, what white is, what black is, and what's in between, how that plays out.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. What do you think about Ed Gilbreth in his blog post here? Says, if Obama survives these latest racial and religious minefields, it will be because enough white voters were willing to exercise critical thinking and stretch their understanding of race, faith, and culture beyond their own familiar experience, which conversely means if Obama loses as a result of this stuff, meaning the controversy over these statements, etc., which Ed Gilbreth clarified in the comments later, he says, it could very well be said it's because he's black.
Right.
Then he says, this doesn't necessarily mean those white voters are racist, just that they do not possess the cultural tools to examine race, faith, and culture beyond their own limited experience.
Right. How would I interpret that?
Yeah. Do you agree with that statement? And
it depends on what he means by racist. I mean, if he says racist in the sense that sort of a racial prejudice on an individual level, meaning that I do not like black people. Like, I just don't like them because they're black.
Right.
Right. In that sense, I would agree with him. But on the other sense, I would say that in a larger historical sense, if people do not take the time to understand the nuance of what Obama was dealing with his pastor, then I would say they are racist in the sense that, just like, it's interesting. I mean, there's a popular reform blogger who blogged about this, and I'm noticing how he gets into the nuance of his own reform theology. He really seeks it out. He studies like Cornelius Van Til or Abraham Kuyper or Calvin or all these different reform theologies, trying to understand their world, trying to understand their theology, but you don't see them trying to understand Jeremiah Wright. Why? Why is that? And so I think there's a certain level of not necessarily maybe a conscious racism, but maybe an unconscious racism. And I wouldn't even use that word. I would say sort of a unconscious form of white privilege, or unconscious form of racial habits. So in that sense, yeah. But I think for the most part, it will be sort of an unconscious racism. Yeah. Because we just live in a world, we inhabit a world that we live in certain racial narratives that we're totally unconscious of, that we've just inherited. We all of us have sort of inherited symbols, worlds, language that direct our habits and the way we live in this world. And so, for instance, the notion that people balk at the notion that there would be any such thing as called Africentric Christianity. Sure. So there's something doesn't sound right about that. It doesn't sound right. Why can't we just can't call it Christianity? Right. Right. Well,
why do we have these black churches? So it's only black people go to this church. Yeah.
It's just like when you go in the Christian bookstore. You have the Christian music, and then you have the black Christian music, right? Or if you read a theological journal, there's theologian Stanley Hauerwas, and there's black theologian James Cone. Right. Why is Stanley Hauerwas a theologian and James Cone a black theologian? Right. That's the kind of culture we live in. But unconscious racial habits blinds us from our participation in those kind of narratives. Yeah. And so we're not. So in that sense, I would say I would expand it, and I'd be interested to see what our brother Ed says about racism. But I would agree with him in the sense that I don't think there's any kind of conscious sort of racism, But I was saying in a larger sense, when people just sort of balked at the notion that Obama is affiliated with a pastor who seeks to affirm the humanity of the black community in which he lives in, to call that racist is a form of unconscious racism.
You're right.
I mean, like there's something wrong with affirming the humanity of black folk. There's something evil about that. Now, I mean, granted, now some of the comments that a lot of people are responding to the comment is two-sided here.
Mm-hmm.
People are responding to some of the inflammatory comments that Reverend Wright has said about 9/11 and so forth.
Sure. But yeah, the comment that keeps coming up over and over again is this could and possibly should derail Barack Obama's candidacy. If it doesn't short-circuit his march for the nomination in the general election, this could really come back to bite him. And it could be said that he should have said something earlier before these videos came out.
Well, what should he have said?
But well, that chastened response that he has given now to saying, I love him. He was my pastor for many years, but I don't agree with him on everything. And in fact, some of the things he said are really offensive and blah, blah, blah,
right.
Which is essentially what he said. Now, I guess it gets back to I support Barack Obama. I have since the day he announced his candidacy.
I haven't said who I support.
Yeah, and you've stayed neutral. You stayed Switzerland on the campaign.
Right. For various reasons.
I think you were talking about
largely because of the Hatch Act on the federal.
We did talk about which candidates you respected over dinner earlier.
Right.
Who shall remain nameless.
Right.
But it's almost like we don't care to understand the complexity of this issue. It's just offensive and bad, and this should reflect poorly on him. And I mean, to the point where they're saying he should lose the election over us.
It's funny who's saying this. It's funny who's saying this. One is the white media saying this.
Right.
And it's funny because the thing to me that's interesting is, number one, from day one, Barack Obama has not made race a central issue in his candidacy, but his political opponents have.
Right.
From Hillary Clinton to whoever else, her husband, Bill Clinton,
right.
A stupid comment he made on the news, what I'm saying, a month or two back, till now.
Right. Yeah.
And some of these are things are speeches that Jeremiah Wright made years ago.
Yeah.
So they're trying to find stuff.
Yeah.
And
so they're digging it out.
And I hope that the American people, especially Christians who are reading the media right now, are very conscious of this.
Right.
They're trying to find something.
Yeah.
And so since they can't find nothing on him as an individual,
right.
Let's look at this radical pastor, his relationship with. Now, it'd be interesting to see the kind of affiliation that John McCain has had over the last 50 years. Well, especially as a white man from the Southwest. You know what I'm saying?
Well, sure. I mean, you don't have to look very far.
Or George Bush.
You don't have to look very far, because John McCain actively recruited the nomination of John Hagee.
Right.
Who has offended a lot of Catholics and
well, a lot of black folk love John Hagee. I went to a large black megachurch recently.
That might be his strategy.
Well,
McCain might be appealing to the
he's
conservative black.
He's charismatic, Pentecostal kind of guy, and you'll find his books on a lot of book tables of a lot of black. Yeah. Charismatic.
So Hagee's kind of in there with the Kenneth Copeland.
Sort of, yeah, in his own way.
Not theologically necessarily, but in that sort of
But I mean, you go to a lot of black churches and you'll see his books on the book table, which is ironic to me.
Yeah. But I think we should be on Christian television, man. We should have our own show.
No, they won't be on Christian television.
Yeah, man. Come on.
Nah, man.
We can do this.
I'm too cynical for Christian television.
TBN, give us a call.
No, I'm too cynical for Christian television, bro.
INSP, you got my number. We're right here in Charlotte. Hook us up.
But
actually, we are going to be on the Danny Fontana show.
Yes, we are.
All right, that's the major scoop here, folks. Anthony Smith, Steve Knight on the Danny Fontana show next month. All right.
That'll be a hoot. But back to, back to whatever we're talking about. I mean, the fact that this man will be judged.
Right. I mean, he's got a close. He's got a close relationship with his pastor, and that's.
But even then,
But the point is the theology, the Black liberation theology.
Afrocentric. There's a difference.
Okay.
I mean, slight difference.
Okay, slight difference.
It can be blurred, but I'm just saying, because that's a language that Jeremiah Wright explicitly uses.
Okay.
Afrocentric.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Okay. So.
Which he probably does. Swim in those waters of Black liberation theology.
Okay. There's probably no simple way to explain that.
Well, Black liberation theology, just as the word says, Black liberation.
Right.
It's about the belief that God has a preferential option for the poor, or the statement that God is Black.
Right.
In a sense that God is in solidarity with those who live historically socially oppressed.
And that's
Africentric. Africentric is about appropriation of the positive aspects of Black culture.
Okay.
It's like saying Africans were people, that we made art, that we did math, that we did science, that we've done great things as a people, that we're not what the culture in many ways transports to other people. We're not pimps, we're not hoes, we're not animals, we're not violent killers, we're not, Black men just don't want white women. All these different stories, racial fantasies and myths about Black folk, is seeking to appropriate positive images in the cultural history of Black folk. And it's ironic to me that people call that racist.
Right.
But, if all you listen to is Sean Hannity, then that's all you're going to get. You know what I'm saying? You got to go through the source.
Let's get back to Jesus was Black. Because one of the videos, I know Jeremiah Wright specifically uses that Black liberation theology language.
Right.
Jesus was Black. Jesus was a Black man. That's why I identify with Jesus. White Americans hear that, and they go, at the very least, Jesus was Jewish. He was, or if they're not, unconsciously they're picturing white Jesus.
Jesus was an Eastern European Jew. I know them.
So I think, when I hear that, having read God of the Oppressed, the little James Cone, I know where that's coming from.
Right.
I know that we're not talking about Jesus was ontologically black-skinned.
Right.
Necessarily.
Right.
Some people might
believe that.
But the theology is more. It's a conceptual idea. Jesus was a black man in the sense that what that represents.
Right.
Historically.
Right. Jesus was a Palestinian Jew who lived in a country that was occupied by the Roman Empire.
Right.
So the historical analogy would be, if we were to transpose Jesus into the future, into our present, or maybe 50 years ago, during Jim Crow, Jesus would have been a black man. If you look at it culturally, historically. He wasn't at the top of the society. He wasn't considered a part of hegemony. As a matter of fact, Jesus does not live, he lives outside the center of the circle. And it's not until he goes into the center of the circle that he's killed, as far as power and society and things like that. He lives in the margins. He goes around. And when he comes into the center, that's when he's crucified. But when we say because I'm definitely influenced by Black liberation theology, and I believe Jesus is Black in the sense that God is a God of the oppressed. But I would take it further. Being a child of the post-civil rights generation, I would say that in many ways everybody is oppressed in a certain sense. You know what I'm saying? In a larger theological sense, at some level. But in a cultural, social, historical sense, it's an understanding that if you really want to get a glimpse of who God is, you got to look at the oppressed. And the fact of the matter is, I don't think it's ironic that Scripture was written for the most part, by people. The central characters in the Scripture are people who are in exile, occupied, enslaved, and so forth. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
and all the way to the New Testament. It's this fledgling small Christian community. They're on the margins of society. They're not in the center, right? And they're mocked and they're oppressed in many different ways. For African Americans, when we're coming to understand Christianity in North America, we latch onto those stories. And it was those stories, the Exodus story, the story of Jesus, that many African Americans began to say, "Oh, hold up now. Our God was a slave, or he was brutalized by the powerful." Right. And then you hear a lot of this echoing in today in black preaching and the black Christian experience in many ways. Negro spirituals. One of the main Negro spirituals that sort of exemplify this would be "Go down, Moses, down to Egypt land. Go tell old Pharaoh, let my people go." Right? So there's understanding that God is with us in the sense that God wants to liberate us politically and socially.
Right.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to go that long rant, man.
No. We should wrap things up here because people are probably getting really bored at this point. But
right.
Let me ask you to maybe just comment further on something you emailed to me today. The statements.
Oh. We won't mention that name.
Hold on.
A particular blog.
Here we go.
Response.
Yeah. Reverend Wright is considered a prophetic voice in the black church. Sometimes prophets are more concerned about social justice than supporting the king, i.e. Obama. Which I think is an interesting point.
Right.
I mean, he's not running for political office.
No, he's not.
And he's not necessarily concerned about, he's interested in speaking truth to power.
Right.
And even if that means someone sitting in the pew in his church is the powerful.
Right.
I think that's an interesting point that hasn't really been brought out in any of these discussions.
No. The thing is that Jeremiah Wright stands in a stream of black prophetic church tradition that's in the same stream of people like Dr. King, for instance. Now, it's interesting, when Dr. King holiday comes around, we always go to I Have a Dream speech.
Right.
Well, we don't talk about the speech about Vietnam. Right. Or we don't talk about his other speeches that critique and deconstructed unjust aspects of American society as he interpreted them. And that's what Wright does. Wright stands within that tradition as an African-American Christian pastor. And he's able to see history from a different light than many aspects of the dominant Christian culture. Yeah. Right? Go ahead.
I mean, set aside the phrase "God damn America" for a second.
Right.
What was Jeremiah Wright?
Let me say something about that.
Okay.
People who get offended by that, and I'm not saying I agree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, have they read the prophets in Israel? They call Israel a whore.
Right.
They call Israel a prostitute.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
there's some pretty.
Prophetic people, man.
There's some pretty strong language used against the nation of Israel.
Exactly. So what I'm saying is, prophets don't.
Not to equate America with Israel.
Well, but it's a collective. It's a collective. It's a group. But even the prophets in Israel, not only did they say it about Israel, the Hebrew prophets, they also prophesied against other nations.
When you say it's a collective, what do you mean?
That we're a nation, that we're a group of people.
Right.
We're a power.
Each is a collective, not Israel and America together.
No.
Okay.
America is a political entity. It's a body politic. It's a nation. And prophets speak to nations. In Israel, in the Old Testament, the Hebrew prophets spoke not just to Israel, but he also prophesied to other nations as well. Go back and read the prophets. But he represents that kind of organic prophetic stream of black preaching. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? And the thing is that he said things a lot of black folk were feeling.
Sure.
Now,
but let me. If that phrase is upsetting to people, and you've responded to that.
Which phrase?
God damn America. Set that aside, and what was he saying that was any different than, say, Ron Paul?
Oh.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You got crazy old white Ron Paul,
right,
and he's saying, we bombed them over there, and so they came over here. I mean, isn't that essentially what Jeremiah Wright was saying in that particular sermon?
I mean...
But people go crazy for Ron Paul.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but...
I mean, he didn't swear. I guess he doesn't swear, but it's the same message.
Let me say this, is that I think that as an African American who actually currently worships in the African American church, you know what I'm saying, that's the world I live in now, and had a lot of experience with that world. When Jeremiah Wright says that, you have to understand it from that context. When he says, God damn America, he's not talking about the America that's been promised to us. He's talking about America in a current real-time sense, America that has various social inequities, America that has possibly a very bad foreign policy, you know, an unjust war. Many Christian denominations and bodies have said. He's talking about the unjust America, America going astray of sorts, America not acting ethical. Goddamn that America. He's not saying goddamn America in the sense that America and all its people and all different ethnics, just in a purely ontological sense, you know, America. But he's talking about a particular kind of America.
Right.
Right? Not the America that King dreamed of. Right? And so, but if you don't understand that if you don't understand that world, if you stand outside, you really don't try to enter into that world, like you try to enter into whatever world you live in. But if you really don't try to understand the nuance of the world in which he inhabits, as a black prophetic preacher, then it's going to sound crazy to you. Right? What does he mean by America? It means a certain kind of America that's fallen astray. I mean, within that narrative, that's how it's understood. You see? Yeah. And so, but the prophet always at the end, I mean, the thing is, what's the rest of the sermon say? What does he say at the end of the sermon? Sure. What does he say in the benediction? What does he really say? But we're not going to hear that part. Right? And that's the other aspect of this, because we live in a sensational culture. Right? So we take sound bites, we take verses out of sermon, out of text, because we don't even know what he says. He's calling America to repentance. Right? That's what prophets do. They call the people of God, they call nations to repentance. And so that's what he's doing. Right. Now, those in the dominant culture who don't understand this, and those who maybe even within the African American community who don't understand that prophetic tradition, you know. Yeah. Walter Brueggemann talks about that in a lot of his writings. He talks about the dominant consciousness, and he talks about an alternative consciousness. You know what I'm saying? A way of looking at the world. And so, if you're looking at the world from above, you know, you saw these crazy fiery prophets. You know, it's like Herod and his advisor. They saw John the Baptist out in the wilderness. Right. John the Baptist is throwing pot shots at Herod. Herod's like, man, this is a crazy man out in the desert. He's messing up the balance of power. He's disturbing the peace. We got to keep the order. We got to keep things intact. Right. And so what we're going to do, we're going to chop his head off. And so, you know, the fact of the matter is that if people really going to understand this, I mean, it'd be a travesty if Jeremiah Wright's sermon really causes that much hurt and pain on Barack Obama's candidacy as a Democratic candidate for the White House. Then America, I'm sad to say, is in a very sad state. Right. And it'll be tragic. But I hope that people have the patience and time to really understand where that comes from. And the fact of the matter is, I don't agree with a lot of things Jeremiah Wright says. Sure. And the fact of the matter is, Obama probably doesn't agree with that. No, he's a politician. Yeah. No politician would say the things that Jeremiah Wright says. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's interesting because it brings right into the national spotlight one of the things that a lot of emerging folks have said. I think Tony Jones has a bit in his new book, The New Christians, where he talks about the myth that everybody in the pew believes the same thing. Right. Everybody believes exactly what their pastor believes. Right. And so we're seeing that, you know, right out in the national spotlight. We have a very famous congregant saying, yeah, he was my pastor for 20 years. We're good friends, but I don't agree with him on everything. Right. And that's reality. I mean, that's just the reality that doesn't really get talked about. Right. But we got to wrap this up. Okay. Thanks for having this conversation with me, man. That's cool, man. Thank you. On camera.
for the world.
Right.
And go see Anthony Smith speaking at Cornerstone Festival this summer.
Right.
Watch for all the writing this man's going to be doing this year. It's coming, and hopefully more at postmodernnegro.com.
We'll see.
In the coming days.
Give me a laptop. I need a laptop.
One laptop per radical emergent blogger. Okay.
Peace, man.
Peace.